Kia ora koutou, Markie here again in my deluxe video studio. There are no frills on this channel, but you do get a nice view, so I hope you enjoy that. The sun is going to set probably during this video, or maybe shortly afterwards. Let's give you a quick look at the sun. That's rather lovely, isn't it? So, welcome my lovely subscribers, and welcome to anyone that's new to the channel. This is a channel about retroactive jealousy. That's the purpose of the channel, I guess, is to get information out there about retroactive jealousy, but we also make videos about all sorts, and I found myself surprising myself by making my second video on true crime. It's not something I've really set out to do, but as I said in other videos, I am a psychotherapist, and I'm always interested in, you know, what's under the surface, both in people and situations and everything really. So that's a kind of common thread with a lot of videos that I do, not least this one, because I want to talk about what I think is really going on in the case of Chris Watts. Now, for those of you that don't normally follow true crime, I'll give you a very brief précis of the situation. I'm aware with the last, or the only other, but the recent other true crime video that I did, I got most of the facts wrong, and found out afterwards through watching other true crime stuff on YouTube, proper true crime, or dedicated true crime channels. So but I did put a link to another video on there which gives is a documentary which gives all the facts, so that'll put right any errors that I made. So Chris Watts, I'm not sure when exactly this was, but he murdered his wife, who was pregnant, and his two daughters, who were both little tots, and then he it's horrible really. Stop listening if you're triggered by this kind of thing. He disposed of the bodies in quite a nasty way. He actually placed his young daughters, he worked for an oil company, so he placed his young daughters' bodies in vats of oil, big tanks of oil, and he buried his wife who had his baby inside her in a shallow grave. Now loads of content has been made about this case. People have been really interested in it, you know, following it really closely, and now there's all kinds of stuff out online on YouTube, so you can hear an interview with his wife's friend, who actually was kind of instrumental in identifying that something was amiss. Without her intervention, it may not have been. He may have gotten away with it. And also his girlfriend, because he was having an affair with somebody, and he just told his wife that he wanted to end the relationship. So that's the story. And the reason I wanted to make this video is, in true Columbo style, something was bugging me about this case. I couldn't quite get my head around it. And everybody's been saying, oh yes, he's a psychopath, he has to be a psychopath, definitely a psychopath, because of what he's done, and the fact that he seemed so cool about it. But he didn't strike me as a psychopath, so something wasn't right there. Now, most serial killers are psychopaths, and I've done another video on psychopaths, so check that one out, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what a psychopath is and what a psychopath isn't. Some serial killers are psychotic, which means they're out of touch with reality, but they are by far the minority. Most are psychopathic, but most psychopaths are not serial killers. Although most serial killers are psychopaths, there are loads of psychopaths out there. Some people prefer to use the word sociopath, and I've talked about that in another video as well, but same difference. Psychopaths aren't necessarily violent, and are not necessarily criminal. In fact, probably most aren't. You probably, let's move the camera so I'm not focusing on that bloke who's trying to do his thing. Let's give you a bit more of the sunset. But psychopaths, generally speaking, don't have a moral compass, and they have very shallow emotions. They don't really experience fear. So it's not that necessarily they're completely unemotional, but their emotions are very shallow. And most people who are psychopaths will have it's unusual for somebody who has the potential to behave in that way, such as in Chris Watts' case, to have got to the age that he was without having drawn attention to himself, you know, drawn attention to the law, basically, or that people would recognize that some of his behaviors, and maybe perhaps even the way he presents, was off. And that doesn't seem to be the case with Chris Watts. Now, psychopaths are often very good at lying. There's different forms of lying, and that's something I've studied quite a bit. So most of us, if we lie, and everybody lies, if you tell me you don't lie, you're a liar, but we lie by omission. It's what we don't say and what we skirt around and what we avoid. That's how most people lie. Psychopaths often are what people would often call barefaced liars. You know, they'll say black is white. They'll lie to your face in a very blatant way quite often. And I don't see any of that in Chris Watts. And in fact, when he did his polygraph, the lie detector, the detective that did it said, "Oh, you're a really bad liar," you know, just when she began with the control questions. And he failed his polygraph terribly. You know, he was an awful liar. So I don't think he's a psychopath. And also he's quite quiet, you know, even to the extent of being quite shy, you know, and quite reserved. And I think, you know, you can have that and be a psychopath, but they tend not to be kind of shrinking violence. That's an interesting little Freudian slip there, and I said violence instead of violence. So what is going on with Chris Watts? Well, I think there are potentially two things going on, but before I share my thoughts on that, I just need to clarify. I am not qualified to make psychiatric diagnoses, or any kind of diagnosis for that matter. So as a psychotherapist, I don't have that prerogative. So a psychiatrist can give a diagnosis, a medical doctor can give a diagnosis, and a clinical psychologist can give a diagnosis, but I can't. Okay, but I'm not, even if I could, I wouldn't be, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to give a diagnosis, but I am going to suggest one. But mainly what I want to do is look at his behavior from what we call a psychodynamic point of view. Okay, so there's a psychodynamic school of psychology and psychotherapy, and actually it's the old school therapy. You know, it's so there was psychoanalysis, which is the real hardcore old school Freudian school of therapy or approach, and then it developed. So there's different kinds of psychoanalysis. There's Kleinian, for example, and so it's developed and grown since Freud, but that's where it comes from. And then but the theory behind the how can I put this, the broader term would be psychodynamic. So psychoanalysis is a form of psychodynamic psychotherapy and a form of psychodynamic thinking. The clue is in the name. Psycho, strictly speaking, it means soul, but we use it to mean the psyche, you know, the psychology, which includes the personality and everything that makes up who we are, not physically, but mentally. And dynamic means changing and kind of connotes relationships within things. So we talk about group dynamics, you know, that's all the movement, all the changes, all the stuff that happens within the members of a group. So dynamics, so what's going on. So there's movement within the psyche. So it's a school of thought that says there are different parts of us, different psychological parts of us that have an interplay between them. So, and broadly speaking, although there's, you know, much more in-depth elements to this school, but very broadly speaking, it's about recognizing that there is a conscious and an unconscious mind. So there are things that we know, and things that we know but we don't know we know. If that makes sense. And I've done videos kind of going into this in more depth, so I will say no more there. But I suppose I want to just make the distinction between, there's different ways you can kind of approach true crime from a psychological point of view. A lot of the way it can be done is by it's kind of actuarial, if you like. It's looking at statistics, you know, going on the basis that, you know, for example, we've done, there's loads of research has been done into murderers, you know, and their motivations, and you know, age of onset of, you know, most common ages that murder, people that murder are active, and there's different kinds of murder. And I think Chris Watts is, I think the mistake people, and that's not what I'm doing here, that's why I wanted to say that. I think the mistake that people make is, because it was like a mass murder, because effectively it's 4 lives that he took away, is to think of him as a serial killer. It'll think of him in the same lines as a serial killer. And the case is presented by the same kind of channels and media outlets that talk about serial killers all the time. So again, I think that's another reason why people jump to thinking that he's a psychopath, because they're almost kind of expecting that. But he wasn't a serial killer. He would be more what you call a mass killer or a spree killer. Although a spree killer, you know, we tend to think of somebody that, you know, goes into the shopping mall and shoots the place up. So where I think Chris Watts is better placed is more in the category of family annihilation. So family annihilation, but family annihilation is interesting. Often it's an aggravated suicide. So what I mean by family annihilation is that somebody kills all their family, and not always, but usually it's a man. And again, not always, but often the trigger is they're going to lose their kids. You know, they're going to lose access to or custody of their children, and they reach a point of despair, suicide, and they think, well, if I can't have them, nobody will. Or sometimes people will kill all members of their family because they want to spare them the grief that their suicide would cause, which is very compassionate of them, isn't it? So I think it's leaning more towards family annihilation, certainly, you know, away from kind of spree killer, a stroke serial killer. And of course the classic spree killer and the serial killer, they're generally killing strangers, not always, but generally. So don't look at, you know, the first thing to remember, it might seem like a statement of the bleeding obvious, but Chris Watts is not a serial killer, and he's not a spree killer, so he shouldn't be looked at, you know, through that lens. Okay, so sorry, my arm is getting tired as I try and hold up the screen here, because like I say, no frills on this channel. Shaky camera, shaky handheld camera, which is actually an iPhone, through the car window. That's how we do it, because we're more interested in the content than we are in the style. So what was going on with Chris Watts? Well, I think 2 things, or maybe 3, the 3 factors I would break it down to. This is just my theory, okay? This is tentative, and I'd be really interested in what you have to say. It'd be really good to get some intelligent, nuanced comments. You know, sometimes you get kind of stupid comments like, oh, you must be a psychopath because what you did was so heinous. That's not the way you measure a psychopath. Is, you know, you all know psychopaths, and they always say you're more likely to meet a psychopath on the governing body of a church or the CEO of an organization than you are in jail. Okay, so most psychopaths operate under the radar. They're not violent. They just have a different brain, you know, and they just have a different response to things, and you know, essentially, you know, very little empathy. That's where a psychopath is in the spectrum of things. So what is going on? Okay, so the first thing, a penny dropped for me was he's a mummy's boy, and he likes a lot of attention from women. He likes to be mothered by women. So why do I say this? So if you followed the case, you'll see that his mum was very loyal to him and very supportive of him and forgave him, and if anything, kind of tended to blame the victim, blamed Shannon, his wife, who he killed. She didn't outrightly say, well, it was her fault that she was killed, but she did. She's on record as saying, you know, that she wasn't a particularly nice person, was a very difficult person, and she didn't like the way that she was treating her boy. So I think there's a mother-son dynamic here. You know, I think this is you know, a very doting mother. The kind of case where, you know, the son can do no wrong. I think that's what's going on with Chris Watts. She described him as being a really nice guy, always quiet. She couldn't believe that he did what he did. There was no precedent for it. So I think that's one thing that's going on. I'm going to come back to that again in a moment. I'm going to weave a few of these different factors together. So the second factor is, I think there's an element of the passive personality exploding. Okay, so I used to teach assertiveness, and I used to teach the model of you have people who are assertive, who I've done a video on this as well, who place equal emphasis on their own needs and the needs of others. People who are aggressive, who place their own needs as more important than the needs of others. People who are passive, who place the needs of others above their own. And then passive aggressive, which is where you appear to be passive but you're actually aggressive. So they're the different kinds of behavior. So what I would say is that Chris Watts seems to fit the mold for the passive behavior. Now, this kind of fits maybe what you might call a spree killer. The kind of classic case of guy goes into work and kills everybody in the workplace. Takes a, you know, you usually hear about this in America. Takes a assault rifle or whatever into the workplace, shoots everybody up, and everybody says, "Oh, he was so quiet. He was so quiet. It's, you know, it's I can't understand it. I can't understand it." The people that do that are always quiet. You know, they're passive. They don't ever say when they're not happy about something. So they bottle up anger and resentment and sadness and shame and guilt and rage, and then something triggers it. It's like gunpowder. Bang! You know, a horrific act is done. Now, not wanting to victim blame, I think from all the various sources I've heard, I think Shanann, that's how you pronounce it apparently, like shenanigans, was probably somebody quite aggressive, somebody quite demanding, somebody quite in your face. She had lots of obsessive compulsive tendencies from what I've understood. Now, don't get me wrong here, I'm not victim blaming, because you can be you know, a little bit aggressive, you can be a bit controlling, you can be a bit obsessive compulsive, you can be ultra bossy, you can be quite nasty, you can, you know, put people down and not be that nice a person. None of that is punishable by the death sentence, and she did not deserve to be killed. Absolutely not. Okay, so I'm not justifying this in any way, but my sense of the dynamic between Chris Watts and Shannon is that she was, you know, the dominant character, and probably gave him quite a hard time, probably bossed him around a lot. He was probably a yes dear, no dear kind of guy, and it built up and built up and built up. But that, I think, is only part of the picture. Now, jumping back to the mother stuff, I think Chris is one of those guys that's always seeking a mother in every relationship that he has with any females. So the fact that Shannon, I struggle with that name, Shannon was, you know, the dominant one, that's another aspect of the mother-child relationship, and I think that that's what probably attracted him to Shannon in the first place. Okay, so he's reenacting the kind of the mother relationship, and I think the pathology here is not just with Chris but with his mum, who comes across as a real sweetie. I'm not really wanting to kind of make her bad or certainly not blame her for the murder, but I think the relationship between Chris and his mum, I think, was part of the dynamic of what happened. Okay, so that's not apportioning blame, it's just looking at cause and effect. So I suspect that no woman would be good enough for her son, and that it's almost inevitable that Chris's mum would not like his partner. Okay, I think there'd be a lot of jealousy there. Okay, and I suspect that Chris's mum probably wasn't backward in coming forward at telling Chris that. Now, there's an incident that took place that they refer to as Nutgate, I think, where Chris and Shannon and the girls were over at their place, I believe, and she was it was for a meal, I think, or certainly food was being provided, and the mum was a bit careless, it seems, or certainly wasn't as careful as Shannon wanted her to be about protecting one of the girls from a severe allergy. I don't think it was peanuts, I think it was something else. But basically the mum was serving ice cream which had at least one of the sort of key allergens that the little girl suffered from. Now, we're not talking about coming out in a rash here, you know, in terms of an allergy, because allergies can mean different things, can't they? We're talking anaphylactic shock, death, you know, to the extent that mum always, Shannon, always used to carry an EpiPen whenever she was with the children, wherever they went. So this was kind of like, you know, if you're careless around these ingredients in this food, it could kill the daughter. And I think what she wanted mum to do was, I don't think she said, you know, you can't have this stuff in the house. I think she just said, well, you know, just please make sure that you serve that when the girl with the allergies isn't around, because otherwise she's going to feel jealous that everyone else is having it, rightly so, and quite understandably. You know, why can't she have the ice cream when everyone else can have it? It's going to, you know, this is a bit thoughtless. So wait till she's gone, or wait till she's gone to bed, I think, something like that, and then everyone can have that other ice cream. But mum was a little bit, it appears, a little bit careless about this, and I don't know exactly what she did or what she didn't do, but it caused a huge rift, which sounds very understandable, really, depending on what it was. And like with these things, you never get the true version, do you? They always say there's, you know, person A's version, person B's version, and then there's the truth. So there's always three versions to every event. So excuse me. So that then caused a big rift. The parents also didn't go to the wedding. So I think that Chris's mum's disapproval of Shannon had an influence on him and was a factor in what he did. Okay, like I said, I'm not blaming her, but I think that dynamic was a factor in what happened. Okay, and the other factor is Chris was having an affair, Nicole Kessinger, and I've seen interviews with Nicole Kessinger, and she sounds completely controlling as well. I'm just going to focus on the sun because it's about to start dipping under the waves. Let's give you a bit of a zoom. Yeah, I can watch that for the sun will set, because we're coming to the end of the video, so the sun is setting on the video as well as in the sky. So I think Chris is looking for a mother in Nicole Kessinger. When she was interviewed, she talked at great length about how she was trying to organise Chris's diet and exercise for him and that kind of thing. And it sounded like, again, I mean, I don't want to use, these kind of sexist phrases, but I suppose "where's the trousers" would be the other phrase. So he's got kind of two mothers, three mothers. So he's got his biological mother, he's got his wife who's like a mother, and he's got a partner who's like a mother and looks after him and sorts him out. And then he's got these kids. Now there's lots of video footage that seems to show him being a really good dad and stuff like that. But I think this was all on quite a superficial level. My guess is that, my hypothesis is that Chris did not really have much tolerance for children, because he wanted to be the child. He wanted to be the one that gets all the attention and gets looked after. So therefore, being able to kill his children in the callous way that he seemed to do, I don't think was driven by psychopathy, but I think it was driven by his sense of rivalry, maybe, with the children, that they're getting some of that attention. So this is where I think he is showing some narcissistic tendencies. So narcissism, and when I use the word narcissism, I use it in the clinical sense, narcissistic personality disorder, not just somebody that takes a lot of selfies. Narcissism is a really horrible presentation. Somebody that's narcissistic, and then there the sun goes up. Sometimes when the sun sets over the sea, you get a flash of green as it goes down. Let's see if we get that. Narcissists and psychopaths are pretty similar. I think they say that every psychopath is narcissistic, but not every narcissist is psychopathic. But actually, narcissists, so Hitler was probably a narcissist, Trump's a narcissist. They are as dangerous as psychopaths quite often. I think Chris was what we call a covert narcissist. So a covert narcissist, so you can break narcissism into lots of different types, really, but often an overt or a malignant narcissist is often very brash, very confident, very loud, quite bullying, very headstrong. And then you can get a covert narcissist who often can appear quite sweet. I've met a few sweet little old ladies, to use another cliche, that are actually far from that, but that's what they present. Actually, they're very toxic, and their narcissism is all about wanting control and wanting attention. I think the sun's gone down, and they can do that through aggression and malign and hostile ways. They can actually do it through generosity and kindness and love bombing, but covert narcissists tend to do it by playing the victim role. And I think Chris, I don't think there are people that are more in the victim mode than the victim role than he was, but I think he did demonstrate that in terms of he found these women who would look after him. And it's interesting, when he was being interviewed by the police, one of the detectives was female, and he really was kind of charming the pants off her, and even though he's in this really horrible situation, he was laughing and joking and flirting and presenting in if it was been in any other circumstances, it would have been a really he would have come across as a really nice guy. And I think that's probably how he came across, and most people saw him. So his narcissism wasn't acted out in an overt and a conscious aggressive sense of control, but more in a poor me, let me be charming and get your attention so that you look after me, wanting to be mothered. So that's my hypothesis. Okay, not a psychopath, although a narcissist can be very similar, and probably somebody that had not exhibited. They said, he's never aggressive. never committed any crimes. I believe that, you know, I think that's the case. I think a psychopath would have been more aggressive, more likely either to have committed crimes or to have a different reputation. If somebody's a psychopath, people aren't going to say, oh, he was really nice, because psychopaths generally aren't, although they can be superficially charming. Most people, if he's a psychopath and he's been that way all his life, most people would probably have something negative to say about him. They'd have positives to say about him, but they would have negatives as well. So I really don't think he was a psychopath. I think he was on the narcissistic spectrum, you know, not necessarily would fit the diagnostic criteria for a narcissistic personality disorder, but would be close to it, and it would be much more veiled, so he probably wouldn't get diagnosed or identified. He'd get away with that. Everyone would think he's a nice guy. You know, I think he was quiet, I think he was shy. I think that's all real. I think generally speaking he was probably a nice guy, and I'm using nice in inverted commas. So superficially nice, but actually he was motivated by the extreme desire for narcissistic supply, which he was getting from his mum. He was wanting to maintain his mum's approval. He was getting that from his mistress. Again, I just feel like I'm using all these outdated, heteronormative, sexist terms, but can't think of better ones. And I think he was motivated by his mum's negative feelings towards his wife, and unconscious negative feelings towards his children, hence the Nutgate incident. So I don't think for 1 minute that his mum wanted to poison his daughter and give her an anaphylactic shock or risk her life, but on an unconscious level I think mum resented Shanann, and mum also resented the children, you know. So I think it was a very unhealthy bond between mum and Chris. And he just had to have attention, but he was pathologically driven towards getting an intense relationship with women that mirrored a mothering pattern. You know, it wasn't just about getting attention from women per se, although he probably did get his narcissistic supply in a range of ways. He probably got it sexually, he probably got it in other ways as well. But I think the main way that he was programmed to get his attention from women was to seek out women who would reenact the role of a mother, an attentive, doting mother. My camera is going all over the place now as my arm is getting really tired. So the sun has set, my voice is going, I have reached my final conclusion. I just want to say again, I'm not victim blaming, I'm not mum blaming. You know, I don't think mum is a malicious person or a bad person. I think maybe Shanann may have been quite a difficult person, but people are allowed to be, you know. Like I say, that's not punishable by the death sentence. So I'm not blaming victims, I'm not blaming other people. I'm just talking about cause and effect and factors that I think have fed into this situation. And that's why Chris comes across as such a passive, shy, nice guy, because he's seeking approval, and he's doing it through the oh, you know, I'm a nice guy, please look after me, please be my mummy kind of way. But all of this unconscious, you know. We talked about the conscious and the unconscious before. Chris wouldn't know this. He wouldn't know that that's his pattern. He'd probably be the last one to know, and if you pointed it out to him, he probably would say, no, that's not true at all. But that's the way the unconscious works. So what do you think? Give us a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Be really interested in your comments, but no stupid, idiotic comments, please. You know, no comments based on ignorance. Intelligent comments based on, you know, we can all have an opinion, but say why. You know, if you want to raise an opinion, why do you have that opinion? What's the evidence behind it? You know, and disagree with me. Great, I love people disagreeing with me. And you might have seen loads of things that I've missed. I might have missed the obvious here, or there might be that you studied the case more than me, and you're thinking, well, no, Mark, that can't be right because X, Y, and Z. Love to hear all that. That would be fantastic. If you just put, if anyone puts any abusive comments, because this kind of video attracts that. So if you give us an abusive comment, then I will destroy you verbally, and then I will just block you. So don't waste your time. Go and troll somebody else. But if you've got something interesting to say, yes, please, very much want to hear that. And it's great to have some discussion around these things. Now, I'm also kind of aware, I don't feel comfortable with the idea of using true crime as entertainment. So I think of this more as education, really, because we all have to deal with people. So the greater our understanding of psychology and how people tick, and particularly how narcissists and psychopaths operate, is really important for all of us. Whatever our profession is. I mean, I do this stuff for a living, but whatever you do, if you could be a plumber, or you could be I don't know, managing director of a major corporation, you're going to work with people, and you're going to have relationships with people, and you're going to have family, and there's going to be these dynamics. So I think it's anything that sheds light on human behaviour, human patterns, human psychology, I think is helpful. So therefore I feel comfortable with putting this material out there. So thank you for watching, really appreciate your support, and I will say goodbye, and as the sun has set upon us, I'll see you again soon in another video, which could be about almost anything. So thank you again, Rangimarie.